Flight attendant. Slaps black woman unaware. She's the billionaire that owns the plane. Ma'am, this area is for premium passengers only. You need to move to the back. The words sliced through the quiet cabin like a blade. Every head in first class turned toward the black woman sitting in seat 1B. Her name was Ava Coleman, a 38-year-old tech investor from Atlanta, Georgia. She'd just buckled her seatbelt on a flight from Los Angeles to New York, dressed in a soft gray suit, a pair of AirPods resting in her ears. She looked up slowly, removing one earbud. "I'm exactly where I belong," she said calmly. The flight attendant, Karen Mills, mid-40s blonde hair pulled into a perfect bun, tightened her jaw. "Then show me your boarding pass." Again. "We've had, incidents before." Her eyes flicked over Ava's dark skin and simple travel bag. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with the kind of disbelief that comes when the same wound gets reopened in a different place. A man across the aisle muttered, "Here we go again." Phones lifted. The world was watching, as it always seemed to be when dignity got tested in public. Karen snatched the boarding pass from Ava's hand and held it up to the light as if checking for counterfeit ink. "First class, huh? Must have been an upgrade." Ava's face didn't move. Only her eyes steadied deliberate. No, it was a purchase. The attendant's lips twitched. "Of course. Wait here, ma'am. I'll confirm with the captain." Her heels clicked down the aisle sharp and confident, the sound of someone certain they were right. Ava inhaled deeply, her fingers tracing the edge of her phone. She'd flown this route a dozen times, met a dozen versions of this same woman, each one convinced that she was out of place. In row 3, a college student whispered to her seatmate, "She's so calm. I'd be losing it right now." Ava wasn't calm because she didn't feel the insult. She was calm because she'd learned that rage was the performance they expected. Instead, she waited. Karen returned with another attendant, both of them wearing tight smiles. "Security is on its way," Karen said, loudly, making sure the nearby passengers could hear. "We'll handle this professionally." "Professionally?" Ava repeated quietly, her voice smooth as glass. Interesting choice of words. The tension in the cabin thickened. Somewhere behind her, a phone chimed with the start of a live stream. Comments began to scroll across the screen. "They always think we can't afford it. Hold your ground, sis." Ava looked out the window, watching the tarmac shimmer under the California sun. She thought of her grandmother, who'd cleaned offices at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport 40 years ago, the same woman who'd told her, "Don't ever shrink so somebody else can stand taller." The captain appeared, silver wings on his chest, practiced authority in every step. "What seems to be the problem?" Karen gestured toward Ava. "Passenger refuses to move from a premium seat. Claims she bought it." The captain's gaze skimmed Ava's blazer, her locks, her dark eyes. "Ma'am, we can sort this out at the gate. Please step off the plane." Ava stood smooth and slow, gathering her bag. "No need to call security," she said. "Let's go talk." As she walked down the narrow aisle, every camera followed. The college student whispered, "She's walking like she owns the place." Outside the cabin, Ava pulled out her phone and made a single call. Her voice dropped low. "Elena, it's Ava. Tell the operations team to hold Flight 713. I need to speak with their director." Inside, Karen was still shaking her head when the captain's intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're experiencing a brief delay for operational review." 10 minutes later, 2 men in suits boarded. One handed Karen an envelope, the other handed a letter to the captain. Karen's face drained of color as she read the embossed logo, Aurora Air Group Executive Board. Ava re-entered the cabin, calm as ever. The whispers turned electric. She looked at Karen, then at the captain. "I'm Ava Coleman, majority shareholder of Aurora Air. This is one of our fleet partners. I came aboard today to experience your customer service firsthand. Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. The cabin was silent except for the soft hum of the engines. Ava leaned slightly closer. You said this section was for people who belong here. She smiled, not cruel, but clear. Looks like I do. Then she turned to the passengers, her voice steady. Let's take off. We've wasted enough time proving worth that was never in question. And as the plane lifted into the sky, 1,000 phones captured the same image, a black woman sitting in her rightful seat, head held high, while the world watched and remembered her calm, the kind that no insult could shake. Karen's voice hit like a slap before her hand ever could. You people always think the rules don't apply to you. It came out loud enough for the entire front cabin to hear. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick, sour, impossible to ignore. The hush that followed was worse than any noise. Every passenger in first class froze mid-sip, mid-scroll, mid-breath. Ava Coleman didn't move. She was still in the aisle, standing inches from the flight attendant who had just decided to test her patience in front of 30 strangers. The plane door was still open. Cool air from the jet bridge rushed in, cutting through the heavy tension. The clock on the bulkhead read 10:14 a.m., 6 minutes before takeoff from LAX to JFK. Karen's eyes darted to the phones, now aimed at her. A young black man, 2 rows back, whispered, "Man, she better chill." His friend shook his head, whispering back, "Nah, let it roll. People need to see this." Ma'am, Karen said again, her voice trembling with fake politeness. "I'm asking you for the last time, move to coach or exit the aircraft." Ava's expression didn't change. "And I'm telling you for the last time," she said evenly, "I have a valid ticket for seat 1B. Karen folded her arms, glancing toward the cockpit for backup. Her colleague, a younger attendant named Lindsay, stepped up beside her, whispering, "Karen, maybe just double-check the manifest." Karen ignored her. "Security's already on its way," she said louder this time. The cabin filled with low murmurs. A man in a business suit muttered, "Unbelievable," while a woman behind him hissed, "This is getting messy." Ava inhaled through her nose and exhaled slowly. She wasn't angry, at least not in the way Karen thought. She was tired. Tired of the same scene replaying in 1,000 different forms, in lobbies, in boardrooms, in restaurants, and now 30,000 feet above it all. Here we go again, she thought. The 2 airport security officers arrived moments later, their navy uniforms crisp, their faces unreadable. "What's the issue?" the taller one asked. Karen pointed like she was reporting a crime. "This passenger refuses to follow crew instructions. She's in a premium seat she didn't pay for." Ava didn't flinch. She handed her phone to the shorter officer. "Boarding pass, digital receipt confirmation number. You can check the timestamp yourself." The officer hesitated, glancing between the screen and her face. "It checks out," he said quietly. Karen blinked. "There must be a system glitch," she insisted. "People make fake tickets all the time. Look at how she's dressed. Enough!" The officer interrupted, his tone sharp. "Ma'am, we'll take it from here." The young black man in row 3 started recording. "Keep that camera steady," someone whispered. "They gon' learn today." Ava turned, slightly scanning the cabin. Some faces were sympathetic, others blank, a few openly hostile. She saw an older black woman in seat 4C watching her with a knowing look, the kind that said, "I've lived this too many times." "I'm staying right here," Ava said softly. "If that's a problem, I'll speak to your operations manager." Karen laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. "You think you can talk your way out of this?" Ava's smile was calm, almost gentle. "I don't need to talk my way out. I just need you to realize what you're walking into." The officer exchanged a look with his partner. "Captain's request," he said reluctantly. "You'll need to step out for a moment, ma'am." Ava picked up her leather tote, adjusted her blazer, and walked down the aisle again, every eye following her. Phones tracked her movements like heat sensors. The whispers turned into quiet outrage. "That's messed up." She showed the ticket. Same story, different day. Outside the plane, Ava stood by the gate window as the officers made their calls. One of them spoke in low tones to the captain, who looked increasingly uneasy. The other scrolled through Ava's flight record, his brow furrowing deeper with every screen he read. Meanwhile, Karen leaned against the galley counter, whispering to Lindsay. "You saw the attitude?" "Right." She was looking for trouble. "I just did my job." Lindsay didn't answer. Her eyes kept flicking to the passengers, still recording through the open curtain. She could already imagine the headlines. Back at the gate, the taller officer handed the captain a printout. "Her ticket's legit," he said. "Paid in full 3 weeks ago with a corporate account under Coleman Holdings. Platinum tier." The captain's face drained of color. He looked toward the jet bridge, where Ava stood quietly, phone in hand, thumb resting on the screen, as if deciding whether to press call. "Ms. Coleman?" He started carefully. "I apologize for the misunderstanding. Please allow us a few minutes to sort this out." Ava nodded once. "Take your time. I'm patient." Inside the plane, Karen exhaled, trying to regain control. "See? She's making a scene for attention. These people—" The captain's voice interrupted over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, there will be a brief delay due to an internal review. We appreciate your patience." "Internal review," Karen repeated, confused. "What does that even mean?" Lindsay's phone buzzed. She glanced at the message and went pale. "Karen, corporate's watching the live stream. It's got 50,000 views already." Karen's mouth fell open. Back at the gate, Ava slipped her phone into her pocket. She looked at the captain and smiled politely. "Once you've finished your review, I'll return to my seat. I assume Ms. Mills will not be serving me again." The captain nodded stiffly. "Understood." As Ava walked back toward the aircraft, the young man in row 3 whispered to his friend, "Yo, that's a boss move." And when she sat down in seat 1B, again fastening her belt with slow precision, the cabin was silent. The silence wasn't fear. It was realization, the kind that crawls under your skin when you realize you've just witnessed something bigger than a flight delay. A woman who'd been publicly shamed had refused to bow her head. And though the plane hadn't left the ground, everyone on board knew the balance of power had already shifted. The engines hummed softly as the plane sat idle on the runway, sunlight spilling through the oval windows. Passengers whispered, phones still in hand, their screens glowing with live comments. Hashtags were already spreading across X and TikTok. Hashtag Aurora Air Incident. Hashtag Seat 1B. Hashtag Ava Coleman. Ava sat in her seat calm and composed, her hands folded neatly on her lap. She didn't scroll, didn't speak, didn't even look at the flight attendant who had just tried to humiliate her in front of everyone. She just breathed. Karen Mills stood a few rows away, pretending to check the overhead bins, but everyone could see the nervous tremor in her hands. Lindsay, the younger attendant, kept glancing between them, her lips pressed tight. The entire first-class cabin felt like a stretched rubber band, quiet, tense, seconds away from snapping. Ava's phone vibrated once on the tray table. She looked down. A single message flashed across the screen board, informed. HR reviewing footage. Stay composed. She smiled faintly. They were already watching. The captain's voice came over the speaker, his tone forced and formal. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll be departing shortly. Please remain seated." Karen moved down the aisle with the beverage cart, her expression frozen in professional politeness. "Something to drink?" she asked the man in 1A, voice bright and brittle. When she reached Ava's row, her hand hesitated over the tray. "No, thank you," Ava said softly. Her voice wasn't cold, it was steady, the kind of calm that made everyone around her uneasy. Karen nodded stiffly and rolled the card away, cheeks flushed. The older black woman in 4C leaned forward just enough to catch Ava's eye. She mouthed the words, "You handled that," with grace. Ava nodded once in acknowledgement. As the plane taxied onto the runway, Lindsay leaned toward Karen and whispered, "You should just apologize." Karen stiffened. "I did nothing wrong." "You called security on a woman who paid for her seat," Lindsay replied. "You know what that looks like on video." Karen didn't answer. She stared straight ahead, gripping the beverage cart until her knuckles turned white. The plane lifted off engines, roaring, and the tension in the cabin shifted no longer outrage, but something heavier. Reflection. Ava closed her eyes, remembering the first time it had happened. She was 22, standing in a downtown Chicago bank trying to cash her first investment check. The teller had looked at her ID, then at her face, and called for the manager. "We just have to verify some things," the woman had said with a smile that wasn't a smile. She'd waited 40 minutes that day, surrounded by people who assumed she didn't belong. She had promised herself it would be the last time she let humiliation shake her. Now, 2 decades later, here she was, again. Same wound, same silence. But this time, she had something more powerful than outrage. She had proof. At cruising altitude, the Wi-Fi kicked in. Notifications flooded her screen, news outlets, reporters, even a statement from Aurora Air's communications team. "We are aware of an incident involving one of our executives. A full investigation is underway." Ava's brow lifted slightly. Executives. They were already choosing their words carefully. Across the aisle, the businessman who had earlier told her to move to Coach, where she belonged, was suddenly very interested in the view outside the window. His phone buzzed with alerts he didn't dare read. Karen walked past, again. Slower this time. Her posture was stiff, her eyes glassy. She stopped at Ava's row. "Ms. Coleman?" she said quietly. "I, would like to apologize if there was a misunderstanding earlier." Ava turned her head, studying her for a long moment. "A misunderstanding is when you spill coffee on someone's shoes," she said evenly. "What you did was an assumption." Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. She nodded quickly and walked away. The young man in row 3 whispered, "That's what real power looks like." Ava didn't respond. She reached into her tote and pulled out a slim folder, flipping through notes for her meeting in New York. Her company, Coleman Ventures, was finalizing a funding deal for a major airline tech upgrade, one that Aurora Air desperately needed. The irony wasn't lost on her. An hour into the flight, Lindsay approached with a discreet smile. "Ms. Coleman, the captain asked if you'd like to visit the cockpit when we land. He'd like to offer a formal apology." Ava looked up. "Tell him I appreciate the offer," she said. "But the apology doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who's been treated like I was today." Lindsay nodded, eyes soft. "Yes, ma'am." As the plane began its descent, Ava watched the clouds part beneath her. The sun broke through, warm and bright, spilling across her face. She thought of her grandmother again, of those long hours mopping floors at the airport, whispering prayers under her breath. The announcement came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing in New York shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts." Ava slipped her phone into her bag and smiled faintly. She knew what waited on the ground: emails, calls, statements. But right now, up here above the noise, she felt something else: peace. Below, Manhattan shimmered in the distance. The cameras were still rolling, but the narrative had already changed. No longer a woman who was told she didn't belong. Now, the woman who proved she always did. And as the landing gear locked into place, the passengers around her stayed silent, not out of fear, but out of respect for the kind of power that didn't have to shout to be heard. "Hi, friend. Before we continue, I need your help. We've noticed the channel losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and helps us keep delivering great content for you. Your support means everything. Comment your city or country below. Let's see how far this community reaches. Thank you now. Back to the story. The wheels touched down at JFK Airport with a soft thud, but the silence inside the cabin was louder than the landing itself. For 5 hours, nobody had said much. The story had already escaped the aircraft. It was alive online, breathing through every share, every comment, every repost. As passengers unbuckled their seatbelts, whispers rippled down the aisle. That's her. Yeah, the woman from the video. Man, she handled that like a queen. Ava Coleman sat still in seat 1B, letting the sound wash over her like ocean waves. She didn't look back, didn't search for faces. Her calm wasn't for show, it was armor. The intercom cracked. "This is your captain speaking. On behalf of Aurora Air, I'd like to personally apologize to Ms. Coleman for the earlier misunderstanding. We value all of our passengers equally." Karen stood frozen at the galley, her eyes wide, as if the words had been a public sentence. Lindsay kept her gaze low, avoiding eye contact altogether. Ava exhaled slowly, unclipping her belt. Apology accepted, she murmured not to the captain, but to herself. When the cabin doors opened, the heat of New York City rushed in thick with the scent of jet fuel and rain. Ava grabbed her bag and stepped into the aisle. The young black man from row 3 raised his fist slightly, a quiet salute. She smiled, nodding back. Outside the jet bridge, 2 men in dark suits waited. One stepped forward. "Ms. Coleman, I'm Aaron Lee, legal counsel for Aurora Air. The board chair requested that I escort you to our executive lounge." Karen's head jerked up at the sound. "Board chair," she whispered. Lindsay's mouth parted in disbelief. Ava paused, looking at the man. "No need for special treatment," she said. "I'm fine." "Ma'am," he replied, voice low, "this isn't for comfort, it's for control. They're trying to get ahead of the story." Ava's lips curved slightly. "Then let's give them a story worth hearing." They walked through the terminal together, the sound of rolling luggage and murmured gossip trailing behind her. Travelers pulled out phones, some pretending to check messages while secretly recording. Within minutes, they reached the private lounge, a quiet world of glass walls, polished marble, and anxious executives. A woman, in a navy suit, stepped forward. "Ms. Coleman, we are deeply sorry for what happened on Flight 713. The employee involved has been placed on leave pending review." Ava raised a hand. "Save it. You're sorry because the internet saw it." The woman swallowed hard. "That's not true." Ava's gaze was steady. "Sure it is. But here's the thing. I'm not here to punish. I'm here to fix what created her in the first place." The room fell silent. Aaron slid a folder across the table. "These are the current contracts for Aurora Air's digital infrastructure. Your company's proposal is still under review. The board had scheduled a vote for next week." Ava leaned back. "Cancel it." "Excuse me. Cancel the vote," she said evenly. "We're not licensing technology to a company that treats respect as optional. We'll reassign our contract to Horizon Aviation instead." Aaron's eyes widened. "That's a $400 million deal." "Then they should have thought about that before humiliating a paying customer," she replied. Outside the glass wall, Karen stood by security tiers, streaking her cheeks as she spoke to HR. Lindsay watched from a distance, face pale, clutching a paper cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Ava's phone buzzed again, news alerts exploding. Aurora Air faces backlash over first-class discrimination. Black executive cancels deal after flight incident. Hashtag Seat 1B trending nationwide. Aaron cleared his throat. "Ms. Coleman, the board chair, would like to speak with you directly." Ava smiled faintly. Of course he would. She took the call on speaker. A male voice came through, nervous, diplomatic. "Ava, this is Daniel Graves. I assure you this incident doesn't reflect our company's values." "Daniel," she interrupted softly, "I helped build your company's values." Maybe it's time you lived by them." There was silence on the line. Then quietly, "You're right." Ava stood gathering her things. "You'll send me the termination paperwork for Ms. Mills and the diversity retraining proposal by morning. And Daniel, don't apologize to me. Apologize publicly to every person who's ever been made to feel small in one of your seats." She ended the call before he could respond. Aaron exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "You just grounded the entire board in one conversation." Ava adjusted her blazer. "No," she said simply. "I just reminded them who owns the runway." As she walked toward the exit, the cameras outside the lounge door flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions, mics, extended voices overlapping. "Ms. Coleman, how do you feel about the viral video? Do you plan to press charges? What message do you want to send?" Ava stopped at the threshold, turned to the crowd, and spoke clearly. "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's ever been told they don't belong. Dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right. Remember that." She stepped into the sunlight, the terminal doors sliding shut behind her. Inside the plane, Karen sat alone in the galley staring at her reflection in the silver tray she once used to serve champagne. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the one who had boarded. That morning, no confidence, no control, just consequence. And somewhere high above the noise, Ava's story was already traveling faster than any jet could fly. Because this wasn't just a flight. It was a lesson, and the world was finally listening. Rain had started to fall over Manhattan, soft and steady, tapping against the glass walls of the Aurora Air headquarters. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside. Reporters camped at the entrance. Headlines rolled across every major network. And in one corner office overlooking Fifth Avenue, Ava Coleman sat in silence, sipping her coffee like nothing had changed, because for her, everything already had. The clock on her desk read 8:47 a.m., exactly 24 hours after she'd walked off Flight 713. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since. Calls from reporters, executives, advocacy groups, and friends who'd texted messages like, "You did that, sis," and finally someone with power standing up. But Ava wasn't celebrating. She was thinking. She opened her laptop. On the screen was a folder labeled Seat 1B Response Plan. Inside were drafts of statements, video clips from passengers, and screenshots of the apology Aurora Air's CEO had posted just hours earlier. It read, "We are deeply sorry for the incident involving Ms. Coleman. We failed to uphold the respect every passenger deserves." Effective immediately. The flight attendant involved has been terminated, and all staff will undergo mandatory anti-bias training. It was neat. Polished, corporate. But to Ava, it still sounded hollow. A knock came at the door. Her assistant Elena peeked in. "You've got visitors reporters from the New York Times and Good Morning America. They want a statement on the record." Ava took a slow breath. "Not yet," she said. "Let's give them something worth saying first." Elena hesitated. "You're planning something, aren't you?" Ava smiled faintly. "You know me too well." Outside, the storm thickened. By noon, social media had shifted from outrage to admiration. Hashtags turned into movement tags. Hashtag Seat 1B. Hashtag Fly with Respect. Hashtag Black Excellence in Flight. In the heart of Brooklyn, a group of black college students gathered in a cafe streaming Ava's earlier press snippet on their phones. She didn't yell, one said. She just spoke facts. "That's power," another replied. "That's how we move now," calm, collected, undeniable. Across town in a Queens barbershop, the TV replayed the footage for the 10th time. The old man nodded. "She carried herself like Michelle Obama on a mission," one said. Laughter broke out. But inside the Aurora boardroom, laughter was nowhere to be found. A dozen executives sat stiff around a glass table, every one of them staring at the woman who now had the world's attention. Ava said, Daniel Graves, the CEO, clearing his throat. We'd like to make a joint statement. Something to show unity. The stock's taking hits. Ava raised a hand. Daniel, you want unity after exposure, not before. Unity comes when people do right without an audience. He shifted uncomfortably. We're doing our best to fix this. No, Ava said. You're doing your best to save face. There's a difference. She clicked her laptop, projecting slides onto the wall. The title read, Rebuilding Trust, the Dignity Program. Every head in the room lifted. Ava continued, her tone steady but sharp. This isn't just about a seat. It's about a system. We're launching a fund under Coleman Ventures, $20 million toward diversity, equity, and cultural training for aviation and hospitality industries nationwide. And Aurora Air will be our first partner. The room was silent. Daniel blinked. 20 million. Ava leaned back, folding her hands. That's pocket change compared to the billions you lose every time your employees forget what respect looks like. Lindsay, the younger flight attendant from Flight 713, sat near the back of the room. She'd been invited as part of the new inclusion committee. Her eyes filled with quiet relief. I saw how people looked at her on that flight, Lindsay said softly, like she was less than. But she never once raised her voice. She just reminded us who she was. Ava turned to her. And who we all could be, she added. By evening, the press release went live. The Dignity Program became headline news. Donations poured in from influencers, corporations, and ordinary people who'd been watching since that moment on the plane. Karen Mills's name was trending too, but not with sympathy. Some called her out. Others called for compassion. Ava, however, said nothing about her. She'd already made her point. Later that night, Ava stood on the rooftop of her midtown apartment, looking out at the city lights. The storm had passed, leaving the streets glistening. Her phone buzzed again, a video message from a young girl, maybe 10 years old, her hair braided neatly. Hi, Ms. Coleman, the girl said shyly. My mom showed me your video. She said you taught them how to treat us right. I want to be like you when I grow up. Ava's eyes softened. She pressed play again, letting the words replay under the hum of the city below. In that moment, she realized the story had outgrown her. It wasn't just about a flight attendant or a misunderstanding or even a company. It was about visibility, about what happens when a black woman refuses to shrink for someone else's comfort. Ava whispered to herself, we belong everywhere. Somewhere in the distance, a jet took off its lights, cutting through the night sky. This time, Ava smiled, because she knew no matter how high they flew, they were finally learning to look up and see her there. Morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Coleman Ventures the next day, spilling across stacks of reports and glowing screens. Ava stood at her office window, coffee in hand, watching the city stretch awake below. The chaos of the last 48 hours had settled into something quieter but heavier. The world wasn't just watching anymore. It was listening. Her assistant, Elena, walked in, holding a tablet. You're trending again. Over 5 million views overnight. They're calling you Seat 1B, the Calm Revolution. Ava gave a small smile. Funny, I didn't set out to start a revolution. I just wanted to sit in the seat I paid for. Elena hesitated. There's more. Aurora's board wants to meet in person today. They're ready to sign on to the Dignity Program. Ava set her coffee down. Book the conference room and bring Lindsay. By noon, the top floor of Aurora Air's headquarters looked different. The usual corporate stiffness had been replaced by quiet humility. Executives lined one side of the long oak table. At the other end sat Ava, poised, unshaken, wearing a navy blazer and diamond studs that caught the light. Lindsay, the younger flight attendant, sat beside her, visibly nervous, but determined. Daniel Graves, the CEO, cleared his throat. Miss Coleman, thank you for coming. We've reviewed your proposal. The board unanimously agrees Aurora will fund and implement the Dignity Program company-wide. Ava studied him carefully. Good, she said. Then let's make it mean something. No photo ops, no staged apologies. I want measurable change representation in leadership equity audits, real accountability. He nodded. Understood. Lindsay spoke up softly. If I can add, the crews are scared. Not just because of what happened, but because they've seen it before. They need to know this isn't just damage control. Ava turned to her. Then they'll hear it from me. She stood walking to the glass wall overlooking the skyline. You know? She began, voice steady but edged with emotion. I've spent my whole life being told where I didn't belong, classrooms, boardrooms, even airplanes. But I learned something the moment you stop asking for permission to exist, you start changing the room. Every person at the table was silent. Seat 1B wasn't about a ticket, she continued. It was about perspective. The same seat that looked out of place to one person became a symbol for millions. That's power you can't buy and you sure can't silence. Lindsay's eyes shimmered. You just gave every one of us a voice, she whispered. Ava looked around the room. Then use it. I'm done speaking for people who already know what's right. It's your turn to say it and live it. By evening, footage from the meeting leaked online. It wasn't the polished press conference Aurora's PR team had planned. It was raw, unscripted, a black woman standing in front of a room full of executives reminding them what humanity costs when you forget who's watching. The clip went viral again. Respect isn't a seat upgrade. It's a standard. Ava Coleman for CEO. Black excellence in real time. In neighborhoods across the country, the story hit different. In Atlanta, barbershops, Chicago airports, and Oakland coffee shops, people replayed her words like a sermon. They talked about dignity, not drama, progress, not pity. That night, Ava sat on her balcony overlooking the Hudson River. The air smelled of rain again, clean and electric. Her phone buzzed another call from a news anchor. She ignored it. Then it rang again, this time flashing unknown caller. She answered. Ms. Coleman, a woman's voice said, trembling. This is Karen Mills. Ava stayed silent. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, Karen continued, but I needed to say thank you. I lost my job. Yeah, but I watched that meeting today. You were right. I didn't just treat you wrong, I treated myself small. I thought power meant control. Now I see it's the opposite. Ava listened quietly, then said, Growth starts where guilt ends. Do something with it. I will, Karen whispered. I'm applying to volunteer with the Dignity Program. Ava's voice softened. Then make sure the next person in your shoes never repeats your mistake. When the call ended, Ava leaned back, the city lights flickering against the glass. For the first time in days, she let herself exhale. Elena stepped onto the balcony holding 2 mugs of tea. You did it, she said. Ava shook her head. We did something, but there's still more sky left to claim. Below, a plane roared overhead, streaking white across the deep blue night. Ava watched it climb higher until it disappeared among the clouds. The story of Seat 1B had started as humiliation, but it ended as transformation. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one rewriting the rules. And when a black woman decides she's done proving she belongs, the world finally realizes she always did. The morning after the Aurora deal was signed, the city felt different. Lighter somehow, like the air itself had learned how to breathe again. The story of Seat 1B had moved beyond headlines. It had become a mirror forcing people to look at themselves and the quiet ways dignity gets tested every day. Ava Coleman woke up before sunrise, the orange glow from the Hudson spilling into her apartment. Her phone buzzed non-stop, but for once, she didn't check it. She walked barefoot to her balcony, wrapped in a gray robe, watching the skyline stretch awake. The city looked endless, and for the first time in years, she felt the same way. Her assistant Elena arrived just after 8, holding her tablet like always. "You've got a full schedule," she said. "Press interviews board, follow-ups, and CNN wants an exclusive tonight." Ava smiled softly. "Let them wait. I need an hour." Elena paused. "You've earned it." Ava nodded, staring out at the clouds moving over the city. The hum of traffic below sounded like a heartbeat. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was running through the storm. She felt like she had outlasted it. She thought about her grandmother again, about the mop bucket in those airport hallways, about the nights she'd come home tired but still made time to pray over Ava's homework, whispering, "Baby, one day, they'll have to see you. Not because you're loud, but because you're undeniable." Tears filled Ava's eyes, not from sadness, but from recognition. She was seen now by millions, but visibility wasn't the prize. Change was. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Lindsay stood there still in her uniform. "Morning, Miss Coleman," she said, shy but proud. "I'm headed to Denver today. First flight since everything." Ava smiled. "You ready? I think so," Lindsay said. "I told the new crew what you said. That calm doesn't mean weak. It means grounded." Ava reached out and squeezed her shoulder. "Then you're already flying higher than most people ever will." Lindsay smiled through misty eyes. "Thank you for all of it." When the door closed, Ava sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began typing a short note. The title read, "To anyone who's ever been told they don't belong. They'll question your worth, your presence, and your right to sit where you sit. Let them. Because the truth is, belonging isn't granted, it's owned. Sit tall, speak soft if you want to, and know that your calm can move mountains. The seat doesn't define you, you define it." She hit post. Within minutes, the message exploded online. Thousands of comments poured in, pilots, nurses, teachers, janitors, students, all saying the same thing. "Thank you for reminding us we matter." By evening, Ava appeared live on Good Morning America. The host leaned forward, voice gentle. "Miss Coleman, after everything that's happened, what do you hope people remember most?" Ava smiled. "That grace is strength. That silence doesn't mean surrender. And that when you lead with dignity, even your enemies have to listen." The studio went quiet. Then applause filled the air. When the segment ended, Ava walked outside into the late afternoon sun. The street buzzed around her, strangers nodding as she passed. Someone shouted from across the sidewalk, "Seat 1B forever." She laughed, shaking her head. As she reached her car, a small boy tugged at his mother's hand and whispered, "Mom, that's the lady from the plane." The mother smiled. "Yes, baby. That's the lady who showed them how to treat people right." Ava turned back, gave the boy a wink, and said softly, "Always remember you belong everywhere." The car door shut. The city faded behind her as the skyline reflected in the glass. Somewhere above, another jet crossed the sky, silver, quiet, free. And for anyone watching, the story of Seat 1B wasn't just a headline anymore. It was a reminder that respect isn't earned by proving yourself. It's kept by never forgetting who you are. If you believe every person deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter where they sit, hit subscribe, join this community, and keep these stories alive. Because change doesn't start in boardrooms. It starts in moments like this, when one woman in one seat decides she's never moving again.